give us a framework for what we're looking at when we go to study nonviolence, as I understand it. One technical thing I'll do before we start that, I have some copies of the syllabus here. I don't have enough for everybody because A, the copy machine isn't working in my department, and B, it would be ecologically incorrect to make 80 copies of this when most of you have known for years that you want to study nonviolence more than anything, and you're in it for the semester and you bought the reader, and the syllabus is in the reader. The reader, incidentally, will say on it, PAX 164B. A, B, very difficult to work that out. But it's actually PAX 164A. Okay? So if for some reason you really want to have syllabus today, and maybe a day or so before you get around to getting a reader, take one of these. Okay? So I wanted to tell you two stories. The first one involves a region, not exactly a nation state, and there are regions that are not exactly nation states. This is not the 18th century anymore. And this little region is called Ladakh, and it's a Himalayan region, and geographically it kind of borders Tibet and India. So parts of it are considered to be politically part of India, parts are considered to be politically part of Tibet. And it got a lot of attention recently, well, about 10 years ago, because there was a woman who went to Ladakh and discovered that they have some very, very interesting patterns of life. In a way, I mean, she didn't use the term, because nobody uses the term nonviolence if they can help it, but in a way they had a very nonviolent culture, with some very interesting attributes which were startling for a Westerner. Now, I should say that Ladakh was not a subsistence economy. They were a little bit above subsistence. They had very beautiful art, artifacts. It's a Buddhist country, so that's probably the reason that Helena Norbert Lodge went there to study them. So these people aren't starving, but they're living up on the higher slopes of the Himalayas, and it's not exactly like Cabo San Lucas there. And food is an important item. And she discovered that, for example, if one family has had a bag of rice stolen, this happened while she was there, and this is serious. This is a major part of their, this is a staple. And so she expected these people to make some moves to get their rice back, and they didn't. So she went to them and said, well, I guess you have no way of knowing who stole the rice. And she said, of course we know who stole the rice. It's a small village. We know everything that goes on. So she said, well, what are you going to do about it? And they said, what? Do something about it? We don't do things about stuff here. And she probed a little further and began to realize that to these people, community is of paramount importance. And if you take off after somebody and say, hey, you stole my bag of rice, yeah, you get some rice back, but you lose the relationship. And when you're living in a small group like that, the relationship in the long run is more important than the rice. So our concept of justice is not operating here. And people began to realize that this is really, once you got over the shock of these little differences, Ladakh was a very happy place. It took a while to realize that because it was not a rich place. You did not see Mercedeses. They didn't get around very well up there. But it was a happy little world, really. I mean, I don't want to be too corny about it, but it was happy. People had good relationships. They had a religion that they took seriously, actually involved a certain amount of spiritual practice. Everybody had enough to eat. I think they were probably happier there than the folks that I visited this summer in Nicaragua. But then, because of the interest taken in Ladakh by outsiders, especially Westerners, there's this idea, they're such good people, we must help them develop. So, by now we know this is a bad idea. But in the 70s and the 80s, we thought it was a wonderful idea. So they got in and they tried to develop Ladakh. Just all they had was happiness at this point. And it was hard to motivate them to do the things that would lead to Western-style development. And one person actually said, if we're going to develop this place, we're going to have to teach them to be greedy. Sounds like a good idea? So they taught them to be greedy, and basically the place is a mess. All the things that they had going for them are breaking down. I'm talking, of course, in broad overgeneralizations. That's what we need to do right now to sort of get us started. So relationships are very bad. Crime is high. Young people don't have any purpose to live for. They don't have seminars, meaning of life. So they're kind of at a loss. And all of the parameters of failure of a modern society are now coming up very fast in Ladakh. Health stuff, poverty stuff, alienation of every kind. So what happened here? Well, although I am a professor and my job description states that I am supposed to take simple ideas and make them complex enough so that intellectuals can understand them, that's what professors do. Every now and then I step out of my role and I ask myself, is there a simple model by which we can understand what went wrong here? And let me read you a quote from the New Internationalist. Is this from the New Internationalist? No, it's from Amnesty International. First example in false attribution. See what happens when I step out of my professorial role. There's a singer in Kingston, Jamaica. Her name is Queen Ifrika, and she's told AI Magazine, quote, if you're developing a positive energy, no matter where your house is, you can bring that to the community and to your surroundings, and from there we can see if we can bring about a different kind of change instead of taking up the gun. This is written in a very impoverished community, incidentally. So she gives us this idea of positive energy. Here's what I'm going to do by way of explaining what happened in Ladakh. And again, I apologize for the simplicity of this model. It's very insulting, an upper division course at Berkeley. But don't worry, it's going to complexify from here on out. But I would say you had basically a positive situation and introduced negative energy and the thing tanked. Okay? It's that simple. I mean, life isn't that simple, but the model that we're using to understand it is that simple. Okay? So let's take now a contrasting story. This story takes place in Bihar. 4 or 5 years ago, there was an outbreak of communal rioting, that is, rioting between Muslims and Hindus. In this case, you read about it in the news. If you still read the news, one of my hopes for this course is that you'll stop doing that unhealthy habit. Anyway, if you read about it in the commercial mass media, you read that this was, neighbors who had seething with violence for a long time. They'd risen up against one another. It was terrible. But I heard a talk from a woman who works with a peace organization, nonviolence organization, in the north of India. She's from Gujarat, which is Gandhi's home state. Her name was Nirmala Deshpande, and she came from this area where they had rushed to see what they could do. She told us two things. First of all, do not believe what you're reading in the papers. I said, hey, no problem. I haven't done that since I was 18. Secondly, she said, let me tell you what actually went on in those villages, which you will never hear in the mass media. First of all, this was not neighbors. These were mobs who were instigated to do this by the central government. The GOI, Government of India these days, has been in the control of a party which is a very secular, sectarian, pro-troublemaking. I know it sounds like I'm describing another country, but this is true in India also. And they actually instigated these mobs. and furnished them with these high-pressure gas canisters and stuff to do this mayhem. So these are basically, quote, Hindu, unquote, mobs. They come sweeping into these little villages, the agricultural villages. And because they're agricultural villages, most of the men are out in the fields when these ruffians arrive. And so just the women and some of the Muslim men, because Muslims tend to be artisans rather than farmers. And immediately, without any preparation, without discussing it ahead of time, they had no idea this was going to happen. Immediately, they took their Muslim neighbors into their home to hide them. Okay? Well, hide is a euphemism because most of these houses are a single room. So the Muslim man comes into the house and the woman of the house shoos him under the puja table, under the altar. So immediately you have this wonderful situation where you have a statue of Ganesha, or, I don't know, Krishna or something like that, and these Muslims are cowering underneath it. Okay, now here's where we get to the point of our story. For our purposes, home after home, the same procedure was repeated. The mob would come up to the door, the woman would be standing there in the doorway, and the mob would say, "We think you're hiding a Muslim in there." And immediately the woman of the house would say, "Yes, I am." Moment of shock, and they would say, "Well, we want him out of there." And the woman would say, "First kill me, then you may enter." And the mob would turn around and go. So they saved hundreds and hundreds of lives by doing this. And again, this was people who, if you stopped them on the street corner and said, what is nonviolence? How do you do it? They probably would not have been able to articulate anything. But I'm going to say, in my simple-minded